Alright, welcome to the How to Cold Weather Camp lesson. We're going to record this lesson for you guys, for those of you who couldn't make it here today in person. I'm going to go over a number of things. The main thing I'm going to go over today is what kind of gear you'll need, what you want to wear when you're cold weather camping, and I'll give you some ideas and show you some variety of some of the lower, cheaper quality gear, and maybe some more on the expensive side. The biggest thing I want to do for people is I don't want them to be afraid of, oh, I can't afford to go cold weather camping. I don't have the kind of money to buy that kind of gear. When we started cold weather camping, we didn't have any money. We were just poor teenagers in Boy Scouts, so we didn't really have very many resources either. So I'll show you how you can cold weather camp with limited resources, and then I'll show you some higher quality stuff that you can look forward to someday. Here on the table I've got a lot of gear. I have some bad examples and I have some good examples, so we're going to go through and show you some of that. Before we get into it, I did send out a copy of the cold weather camp out. This is your personal checklist. This just has a list of items that you're going to want to make sure that you have when you go on this camp out. It's not all inclusive. There might be other things you want as well. So just go through it and make sure you have at least these items. I've included on this checklist your 10 essentials. Those are pretty much your basics for any kind of camp out or hiking or outing that you're doing. You want to make sure you have your 10 essentials, like your pocket knife, your first aid kit, a rain jacket in case it rains, insect repellent. Since we're going winter camping, insect repellent, obviously not really necessary in your 10 essentials. So if you want to limit that down, that's totally fine. But these 10 essentials are things that you should be bringing with you pretty much on any outing you're going on. Included in this list, I also have some of the basic camping equipment you're going to want. I have a list of some clothing, and I'm going to go over the clothing in detail today because that's what you mainly want to be aware of. And then also just some personal gear that might help, like maybe you want to bring some sunglasses because in the winter, with the sun reflecting off the snow, things are going to be pretty bright outside. So go through this list. Even if you've been camping for 20 years like I have, you think you know everything, and then you sit down and realize, oh, I forgot to pack this. So I even use checklists when I go camping just to make sure that I've included everything. Go through this now. Don't wait until the night before the camp out, because I know a lot of you do that. And I've been on campouts with some of you guys where you show up with a sleeping bag in one arm and a pillow in the other, and you think you're going to be good. For summer camping, maybe you can get away with that. Some of you are aware of a backpacking trip we did where kids literally showed up with a pillow in one hand, a 10-man tent in the other, and you guys know how miserable that was and how horrible it was. With summer camping and if you're camping in the spring or hiking in the spring, it's probably not the biggest deal. Like, you'll be miserable, but you're going to survive. When it comes to winter camping, that's not okay, and you're not allowed to do that because you need to make sure that you're going to survive these cold weathers. So that's the biggest importance we want to stress is you need to be prepared for cold weather camping because it is a dangerous thing. Now that being said, I don't want to scare you away. I've gone on many cold weather campouts. We used to go camping every month when we were in Boy Scouts. So if you assume probably 3 or 4 of those months a year were cold weather campouts. And we were in Scouts for about 5 years. So I've gone on at least 20 winter campouts would be my guess, so I'm pretty much an expert. But that being said, we never really had issues with anyone getting hurt or not surviving our cold weather campouts. It always seemed that everyone who went on these campouts with us survived. So I think you'll be okay, but again, we do want to stress the importance. It is a dangerous thing we're doing, but as long as you're prepared, you're going to be fine. But I want to make sure that you're not just fine. I want to make sure that you're actually going to be comfortable on this winter campout. Because the last thing I want you to do is go home saying, man, that sucked, I'll never do that again. There's a reason I keep doing cold weather campouts. When you've gone camping as much as I have, you realize there's kind of a lot of fun, and there's a lot of intensity to a cold weather campout that makes it a lot of fun. So they're very enjoyable, and you get to a stage where if you're prepared enough, you're going to stay warm. You're going to be warm, you're going to be comfortable, and everything's going to be just fine. So go over this list ahead of time, maybe a week ahead of time. Start accumulating the gear. Just throw it in a corner of your room so that you know you have all the stuff there and it's ready to go the night before, so you're ready to go. Don't plan on going through this checklist the night before and then realize, oh crap, I don't have boots. Okay, now you're going to go camping and you're going to have frozen toes the entire time. So today I'm going to cover pretty much two basic things, and they're on the back side of this as well. The two basic principles for when it comes to cold weather camping is layers. You need to be able to wear layers, and I'll talk about the importance of layers in just a bit. And the second thing is you need to be able to stay dry, and they kind of go hand in hand. If you get wet at all, or if you sweat too much and your body gets moist and wet, that's immediately going to get rid of all your body warmth. So if your clothes get wet, it doesn't matter how many layers you have on. If you have wet clothes, it's just going to suck the heat away from your body. So the two main principles we're going to go over is how to stay dry, and how to layer properly. So let's go ahead and get into some of this awesome gear that we have laid out here on the table. So again, go through this, read through this, make sure you're familiar with this, but I'm going to go over most of it here in detail as well. So use those checklists to help you out when you are planning and when you're camping. Like I said, I have a big smorgasbord of different materials here. Some of it's more on the expensive side, some of it's more on the cheap side. Again, if you're new to this, you can probably find a lot of this gear just at DI, Savers. That's where I acquired most of my camping gear when I first started camping, or when I first started cold weather camping. So when it comes to your layers, there's pretty much your three basic layers. The first layer is what they call your base layer, and then it's essentially your underwear. So here I have some crappy versions of your long underwear. So when you're cold weather camping, or if you're doing any winter sports pretty much where you're going to be out in cold temperatures for a long time, the first layer is what we call your base layer, and that's pretty much what you're going to wear directly onto your skin. It's pretty much your underwear. The next is what they call your mid layer, which is exactly how it sounds. It's the middle layer. Yes, question?
I was just going to ask, why are those layers not, I mean, you said that was not very good.
Yeah, I'll go into more detail. I'll show you some good qualities, and I'll explain why these, I mean, they're okay. If this is what you have, go with it. They'll be fine, but I'll go more into detail. So you have your base layer, which is pretty much your underwear. It's what's going to be directly on your skin. Then your mid layer is anything you're going to be wearing in between your base layer and your outer layer. Your outer layer is exactly how it sounds. It's what's going to go on the outside of your body. So when it comes to your outer layer, typically you want your outer layer to be as waterproof as it can be, because you don't want any water or any snow or anything getting on the inside and soaking your mid layer or your base layer, because that would be rough. So those are pretty much it. Those are your three basic layers. You got your base layer, which is essentially your long underwear. You have your mid layer, which is maybe like your pants, your normal shirt, whatever you're going to wear over your underwear, and maybe like a light jacket. And then your outer layer is more of your waterproofing material that you want to wear. So you got those three base layers. Now, when I say this, I worry some of you are going to think, so I just need 3 layers. No. Don't go with that. Maybe those 3 layers will be enough. Depends on the temperature, depends on how cold it is. Remember, the benefit with layers is you could always put more on. So if you find, oh man, I tried on my underwear, I tried on my light jacket, I threw my coat over that, and I felt pretty good at home, you might get out there and find it gets 10 below 0, and now you're freezing with just those 3 layers. So those are the 3 basics of the layers, but you can wear as many of those layers as you want. So for me, when I first started out, you'll notice I have 2 of these thermals. I have 2 sets of these thermals because I would wear both. Because I found if I wore both of these, chances are I tended to stay a lot warmer. So the benefit to layers is you'll see those kids when you go sledding, they have these big old giant poofy coats. And this one's not a good example, maybe. Let's see. You'll have like these big old giant winter poofy coats when you're going sledding, and you'll see those kids, they throw these giant coats on, and they're bundled to the brim. If you've ever seen The Christmas Story, where they bundle up that little kid, and he's all big and poofy, he can't even move his arms. You've all experienced it, or you've seen someone with these big old giant winter coats. Now the problem with these coats is, yeah, they're warm, they're going to keep you warm, but let's say you get out there, you're camping, you start building your snow cave, and you're shoveling, and you're active, you're physically active, or maybe you're out skiing or sledding, and you're running up that hill. When your body starts moving, you're going to build up a lot of warmth, and you're going to build up a lot of heat. But if you have this big old giant winter coat, you're going to start sweating a lot. And remember, if you're sweating, then you're not going to stay dry. You're going to start to get wet and you're going to start to get cold. Okay, so the problem is you have this big winter coat, but you take this winter coat off and all you got underneath it is your shirt and maybe your thermal layers, and now you're too cold. So the problem with just having one big winter coat that keeps you nice and warm is, what if you need to take it off? What if you start getting too warm and you need to take that off? So the benefit with layers is, if you have several pairs of layers on and you get too warm, just take a layer off. If you're still too warm, take off another layer. If it's too cold, put an extra layer back on. So it's much more valuable to have a lot of little layers than it is to have just one big, fat, warm winter coat. Because that way you'll be able to moderate your temperature better, and you'll be able to stay dry, you'll keep yourself from sweating, and you'll also be able to stay warm. Okay, so I'm going to go through, and I'm just going to start with probably your base layers, and then I'll go through and I'll show you different stuff that you'll want to wear for all different areas of your body. I'll show you some good examples of stuff to wear, some bad examples of stuff to wear as well. So the second main thing I really wanted to push is you need to start looking at the material of the clothing that you're used to. Now, most of us, we probably don't really look at the tags on our clothing unless we're looking for sizes. Oh, I need a 30-32 pant size. Yeah, perfect, that will work for me. But most people don't really look at the tags in detail, but almost every apparel you wear will have little tags in them, and those tags actually tell you a lot more information than just the size that you're wearing, and you need to start looking at those, because those tell you the material that clothing is made out of. So when it comes to material, if you don't have the right material, it's going to absorb water a lot better. So natural materials like cloth will tend to absorb water very easily, and you know this because most of your clothing is made out of cloth. Chances are whatever you're wearing on you right now is made out of cloth. Blue jeans are made out of cloth. Yes.
Do you mean cotton?
Cotton, cloth, cotton, same.
Cotton. Cloth. Okay.
Same thing. There's different types of cloth, but usually when we say cloth, we're talking about cotton. Yeah. So sorry. So natural materials like cotton tend to absorb water very easily, and when you're cold weather camping or when you're out playing in the snow, that's not a very good thing. And you know this because you've experienced this. You've gone sledding in your jeans, and by the time you're done, the bottom 6 inches of your jeans are completely soaked, they're completely encrusted, and sometimes, depending on how cold it is, they're already frozen over again. So we want to completely avoid that when we're winter camping, because we want to stay as dry as possible. So in our troop, if you showed up to a cold weather camp out wearing jeans, you immediately got made fun of, and everyone would trash talk you the whole time. So it was a big no-no. You cannot wear jeans to a cold weather camp out. And so some of you are sitting there thinking, I don't have anything but jeans, but you might actually do. So start checking your closet, start checking your drawers, see if maybe you have something of these other materials that I'm going to show you. And you want to be on the lookout for that. So the main thing is start looking at the tags on what you have and start looking at the materials. So cotton is a big no-no. And if that's all you have, go with it. Like these right here are made out of cotton. And I rocked these for like 5 or 10 years because that's all I had. So if that's all you have to go with, it's better than nothing. But these were also being worn kind of on your skin, so this wasn't as at risk of getting soaked. But if you're doing more active stuff while you're camping, if you're sledding, if you're building your snow cave, it takes a lot of effort to build that snow cave, and you're going to build up a lot of sweat. So ideally, you want to go with some thermals that are made out of synthetic materials. So anything that says polyester, nylon, those are all man-made materials. They don't occur naturally in nature. And most of the time, those are very waterproof, extremely waterproof. And you can test it out, and you'll know. You can kind of feel the material and be like, man, that doesn't feel natural. That feels man-made. But don't be fooled. Like, you'll find stuff that be like, hey, that looks like a nice fluffy cotton coat. In fact, this coat right here is actually 100% polyester. So polyester comes in different shapes and textures. So don't just be fooled by how it looks. Make sure you're reading the tags on the clothing and look for any that are made from man-made materials like polyester or nylon. If you're not sure what man-made materials clothing are made out of, go do a quick Google search and you'll see. That being said, there is one natural material that occurs in nature that is actually very good for cold weather camping, and it's actually very good at repelling water, and that's wool. And there's just something magical or special about the properties of wool that it will repel water, and it's almost better than having like something made out of nylon, because the nylon, it just resists water a lot. But the thing about wool is it will still kind of absorb the water, but even though it's wet, it will still keep you warm, which kind of goes contrary to the idea of stay dry, stay dry, stay dry, because if you get wet, immediately you're going to start to cool off, and you're just going to lose your body heat. But wool kind of has this magical property to it, where even if it's damp or wet, it might be a little bit colder than if it was dry, but it can still keep you warm. So wool is a very, very important material to keep an eye out for. So when it comes to like socks or scarves, a lot of things like that will be made out of wool. So kind of keep an eye out for that. So like this right here is just an all cotton hat, and it may be nice and fluffy and it will keep me warm. But if I'm going to be rolling around in the snow and I know I'm going to get a lot of snow on my head, I'll probably want to wear something over this so that my beanie doesn't get soaked, or maybe just take it off so that it doesn't get soaked, something like that. So keep an eye out for those materials as you're shopping, as you go check Savers, DDI. Start looking at the tags, and everything's on the tags, almost everything. Start looking at the materials it's made out of, and some of them will be mixes. Some of them will be like, oh, it's 75% polyester, 25% nylon, and that's fine as long as it's all made out of man-made materials. It's going to repel water pretty good, and you can kind of tell also when you feel it. You'll be like, yeah, that feels like it's pretty waterproof, or you'll feel it and be like, I don't know, I think that's going to absorb water pretty well. And if you want to test it, if you have stuff at home and you're like, I don't know, it says it's made out of nylon, but it looks like it's not very waterproof, go stick it under the sink, put some water on it, and you'll see. Like, go test it out. You'll see just how water resistant it's going to be. Okay, so keep that in mind with your materials. Look for stuff that's made from man-made materials, polyester, nylon, and wool. Those are going to be your key things you want to go for. And that's not saying that if it's made out of cotton, you can't wear it at all. Like I said, I rocked these cotton thermals for like 10 years because that's all I had. If you want to go get some more advanced thermals, oftentimes these come in polyester. These are actually made out of merino wool, so it's kind of a lighter wool. But the benefit of having polyester or wool, especially for your base layer, because that's what's touching your skin, and so it's going to help lick off the moisture from your skin, wick it off, and it's going to help keep you more dry. So if you can go with polyester or wool for your base layer, that'll be beneficial. However, this pair of pants alone ran me about $40. So if you're going to get a shirt and a pants for your base layer that's made out of merino wool, you're looking at spending close to about $90 for those. Where these, you can get them for probably like $2 or $4 at the Savers. So it really just depends on what your budget is, what you're willing to spend, because obviously you can spend a lot more and get higher quality stuff, or you can spend very little and get okay stuff that will work just fine. And just because, like I said, just because it's made out of cotton doesn't mean don't go with it. No. Just if you use it in a way that you know you're going to stay dry with it, you're probably going to be fine. So now let's go through and let's talk about some different stuff that you're going to wear. Question.
Talk about worsted wool, how it's not itchy.
Worsted wool?
Yeah, because, I don't know, it's normal wool is itchy, and worsted wool is where they machine it to not be as pokey.
So, yeah, there's different types of wool out there, worsted wool, merino wool. So just look into those and decide what you want to rock. The nice thing about wool is you can usually go get a nice big fluffy pair of wool socks for pretty cheap. That way you don't have to rock these big old fluffy cotton socks. So this would be way more valuable for you than these. These will probably be a little bit cheaper than wool socks, but wool socks honestly there's so much out there that you can probably find those pretty cheap. So as I go through this gear, I'll kind of talk about some of the prices, the price range on some of these, so you'll kind of know what to look out for. So if you're looking to spend some money, what I would do is I would first look at, see, okay, what do I currently have, and what do I still really need? So last year, Ben Andrews looked at his gear, and he's like, man, there's a lot I could go spend money on to get, but he looked at everything he had currently. He's like, well, this will be okay here, this will be okay here. And Ben Andrews finally decided, okay, I'm going to go spend money on get me a nice pair of boots, because that's what I'm really lacking is boots, and I want to make sure that my feet are going to stay dry and my feet are going to stay warm. So he went and spent money on that. And over time, you'll kind of accumulate some gear. I've spent a lot of money over the past 20 years on some of this gear, but you don't have to go break the bank just to go cold weather camping. Use what you already have if it's good enough and if it's decent enough and it's going to keep you warm, and then maybe go shopping around at Savers in the DI, see if you can find any good stuff, because you'll be surprised. You'll find some pretty good stuff at Savers in DI. Like these pair of boots right here, these are my winter camping boots. These are pretty solid hardcore boots. They're going to keep your feet nice and toasty, and they also have a couple inches of just waterproofness on the bottom, so they're also going to keep your feet toasty and dry. These I bought online on Amazon, I think for like 60 or 80 bucks, so a little bit more on the expensive side.
What's the brand on those?
These brand are Kamik. Anyways, if you have questions on any specific gear, just text me and I can send you links or stuff for any of this stuff that you see here today. But Teddy decided he wanted some nice winter boots like mine. So but I told him, like, well, it's going to cost you about 60, 80 bucks. He's like, I don't want to spend 80 bucks. I'll just go see if they have them at the DI. I'm like, Teddy, these are nice winter boots. You're not going to find these at the DI. Sure enough, he went to the DI and he got the exact brand, the exact same pair of boots that I currently have, and he got them for like 10, 15 bucks. So you never know what you'll actually find. So don't be worried about breaking the bank. Just decide how much you want to spend. If all you got is 15, 20 bucks to spend on gear, go see what you can find at DI, Savers. And again, focus on make sure you have everything kind of covered. So let's go through and let's take a look at most of the gear here on this table. I don't want us to take up too much time with it. I already kind of talked about the basics of making sure you're layering up, make sure you have multiple layers, and make sure you're checking the material that your stuff is made out of. Also, you need to be thinking, so let's kind of start with your basics. You're going to be sleeping. You want to sleep at night, so you need to start thinking now, because there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. You can sleep in a hammock, you can sleep on a cot, you can build a snow cave, but let's say you get there, you find out, there's not enough snow to build a snow cave, or we don't have time to build a snow cave, so you're going to end up just cot camping anyways. So don't just plan on, I'm going to sleep in the snow cave, right? And then find out, yeah, that didn't fall through, and then you don't have something else as your backup that you're going to sleep with. So start thinking now, how are you going to sleep? And how are you going to sleep if your snow cave doesn't work out, or you aren't able to build your snow cave? So start thinking now, how are you going to do that? A tent would be your basic. You need something that's going to keep snow off of you if it snows in the night. But for us as scouts, we started learning how to camp with the bare basics. So really all you need is a sleeping bag and a tarp. If you have a sleeping bag and a tarp, you're going to survive. You're going to be okay. The sleeping bag, you can just lay it down on the snow, lay your sleeping bag on it. Or the tarp, you can lay out on the snow, lay your sleeping bag on it, fold the tarp over yourself in case it snows on you in the night, and you might wake up with an inch or two of snow on you. That's fine. You'll be okay. I've done that. You wake up with snow on you, you just shake it off, and you'll stay dry, you'll stay fine. But you need a way to stay dry. So either in a tent or using a tarp. If you're in a snow cave, obviously that's going to keep you dry. So start thinking about how you're going to sleep and how you're going to stay warm when you sleep. That might be the most important thing, because you'll be there at the camp for probably about 3 or 4 hours. Then you'll go to bed. You'll sleep for 8 hours. You'll wake up. We'll eat breakfast and do stuff for the day. But probably the majority of your time is going to be sleeping. So if you're not warm while you're sleeping, you're going to have a miserable time. And you can talk to people who went on the last camp out who told you, yeah, I just stayed up the whole night because I was just freezing the whole time. So definitely make sure that your sleeping arrangement is going to be warm, because you can have cold feet, but as soon as you go to bed, they're going to warm up in the night and you'll be fine. So when it comes to tarps keeping you warm, even if you are sleeping in a snow cave, you'll want a tarp because you don't want to sleep straight on the snow because your body heat will melt the snow, it will soak your bag, and like we said, if you're not dry, you're going to be cold. So as soon as your bag gets soaked, then you're going to be cold. So you can have the most insulated sleeping bag, minus 20 degree sleeping bag, but if it gets soaked from your snow cave, it's not going to do anything for you. So for sure you'll want a tarp or something that you can lay down to put your sleeping bag on so that your sleeping bag is not directly on snow. Now you could get away with using an air mattress, or not an air mattress, but a sleeping pad. There's sleeping pads that are built for camping. I didn't grab any examples here. There's a lot of different examples. There's kinds that you can just blow up. There's small, little, compact. There's some that are meant for backpacking that are super lightweight. But for sure, you'll probably want a pad as well. And it's not mostly for comfort. It's mostly for insulation, especially when you're cold weather camping. Because otherwise, the coldness from the snow you're sleeping on is just going to go right up through your sleeping bag. And a lot of people don't realize, but your sleeping bag doesn't really insulate on the bottom because your body is squishing all that insulation down to where it's so tiny it doesn't insulate you anyways. So your sleeping pad is mostly to protect the bottom of your sleeping bag so that you can actually stay dry and you can be insulated. So here's two examples where it comes to tarps. This is a cheap tarp that you can find at Walmart. You can get one of these for like 10 or 15 bucks. Make sure it's big enough that it'll actually fit you and your sleeping bag. The worst thing is if your toes are hanging out of your sleeping bag. Now your toes get cold and wet in the night. Like, make sure that you have a tarp that's going to cover you. And when we first started camping, we just honestly just go to Walmart, get $10, $15 tarp. It'll do just fine. They're not as waterproof as other types of tarps, but I camped for 10 years like that. And it wasn't until we hit a rainstorm where my top got completely soaked because it soaked through my cheap $15 Walmart tarp that I finally decided, okay, it's time to upgrade, get me a nice quality tarp. This tarp is a nylon tarp, so it's definitely made out of much better material. These are completely waterproof. I've slept in rainstorms with these, and the rain's just pouring on your face, but it's just hitting my tarp the whole time, and so I stayed dry the whole night. So these tarps, I can guarantee you, are going to be completely waterproof. These are more on the expensive side, so one of these, depending on the size, is going to cost about 40 bucks. If you want a smaller one, obviously it'll be cheaper. The more material, the more it's going to cost. So depending on how the size you're going to go. When it comes to your sleeping bags, like I said, you don't need to go out and spend $200 or $100 on a really nice sleeping bag that's going to keep you warm in the cold. Like we said, just do layers. So this right here is just a cheap Coleman summer sleeping bag. It's not the best quality. This is not even a mummy bag. It's just one of those rectangular bags. I don't know what you call those. But this is just your cheap regular. This is what you would take in the summer. And this would probably keep you warm down to about 60 degrees, maybe 50 degrees if it gets a little chilly while you're at your camp out in the summer. So, but I would use this. You could sleep with this just fine, but not alone. So what I would do is, let's say you go and you find, oh, I have this big old fat sleeping bag, and then I have this smaller one. This one's rated to like 30 degrees, but you can't really trust the ratings on sleeping bags. Usually you want to add 20 degrees onto it. So this says it's 30 degrees. Realistically, it's more of a 50 degree sleeping bag. So again, this is something that you would want to use in the summer as well. You wouldn't sleep solely with this in the winter, or you will freeze to death. Same with this bag. You wouldn't want to sleep with just this in the winter. You're going to be miserable. Maybe you'll survive with this, but it's going to suck. But you can take your smaller sleeping bag, stick it inside of your big sleeping bag, and maybe the two of them together will do a pretty decent job at keeping you warm. And let's say even then you're worried, bring an extra small sleeping bag. Like, there's no limit to how much you can layer. If we can layer with our clothing, obviously you can do it with your sleeping bags. I got to the point where I could sleep out in the open, not in a snow cave, but I had a thick sleeping bag like this, and then I had my 0 degree sleeping bag I'd stick inside of it. Those two together kept me warm all through the night in any harsh condition. So this would be something more like IROX. So even this is a more of a higher quality sleeping bag. This would cost you at least 60, 80 bucks. And this is a minus 20 degree sleeping bag, which means it's really close to the 0 degree sleeping bag. But I've camped with this in the fall just on its own, and I've slept chilly in this too. So it really just depends on you, how warm you sleep, and how your sleeping bags tend to work for you. Like, this is a really good sleeping bag. It will keep me really warm in winter conditions, but I've also slept kind of chilly in just spring conditions in this minus 20. So you can't go with what the rating on the sleeping bags say. So this sleeping bag is a really good quality sleeping bag, but again, I'm not going to go camp with just the sleeping bag when it's 15 degrees out. I'll die. Like, this is really warm. Maybe I'll survive, but it's going to be miserable. But if I take this and this smaller sleeping bag and I stick these two together, I'm going to stay toasty warm all night. So layer up your sleeping bags. Even if you just have crappy $20 Walmart sleeping bags at home, grab 2 or 3 of them. Stick them together, and you'll probably sleep pretty comfortable. Question?
Why is a mummy bag better?
Mummy bags are usually better for cold weather camping with a rectangle. I don't know, do they call them rectangle bags?
Summer bag.
Summer bag. With your rectangular summer bag, the opening is just big and open. You can't really close it off very well, so you're letting off a lot of that heat. With mummy bags, all mummy bags are designed so that the opening you can cinch, you can tighten it around your shoulders, so that really the only thing that's going to stay out is your head. Most of them are designed with ways that it keeps your head enclosed as well, and the only thing that's exposed is your face. I go even more extreme. I'll put my whole body inside this sleeping bag. I zip it all the way until there's just a breathe hole, and I just stick my mouth there so I can breathe in the night. So it just depends on how you like to sleep when you're camping. But mummy bags will definitely keep you a lot more warm, mostly because they're designed for that. They're designed for colder, harsher climates. These are designed to keep the morning chill off of you in the summer. Like, it's just the quality. So like I said, don't feel like you need to go spend a buttload of money and break the bank. Just take whatever you have available, and if you really need to, you're like, I only have the one sleeping bag, go buy an extra one, maybe a cheaper quality. But two cheap quality sleeping bags together will probably do you better than just one really nice 0 degree sleeping bag. Because is it really 0 degrees? Most likely it's not as good as you think. So 2 sleeping bags, crappy sleeping bags together will probably be a little bit better than one really nice one. Alright, question?
So I was going to say on the rating on the sleeping bags, if it says minus 20, it doesn't mean you're going to be comfortable at minus 20. It means you're probably going to just survive at minus 20. So if you want something that's really comfortable at a really low temperature, you probably want to go for like a minus 40 bag or something like that.
Exactly. That's exactly correct. And it just has to do with marketing. Most of these cheap sleeping bag companies that make sleeping bags, they don't really care to market their stuff, so they'll just say, oh yeah, that's a 30 degree. It's like, has it been tested? Has it been proven? Chances are, if it's not like a super expensive sleeping bag that someone's going to take into the Himalayas with them, it probably hasn't been tested officially, and it hasn't been proven officially. So if you go into those more expensive sleeping bags, they will have 2 different ratings. They'll have what they call a survival rating, and they'll have what they call a comfort rating, where they're like, well, you can survive this temperature, but if you want to be comfortable, it will only really go down to like minus 10 degrees. But those are more the expensive ones. When it comes to cheap sleeping bags, the rating that's on there is just what the company decided to put on there. So they're not accurate, they're not proven, they're not tested. So yeah, the basic rule of thumb is they're really survival degrees. So like this one right here says it's a 20 degree sleeping bag. That means you'll probably survive 20 degrees in this bag alone. Realistically, you're going to freeze your butt off the whole night and it's going to suck. So this realistically is more a comfort rating of probably 50 degrees, which is not that cold. So always add like 20 or 30 degrees onto what the companies say, and that's realistically your comfort rating, because they're probably thinking, oh, this is their survival rating, but they don't advertise it that way because they want to sell sleeping bags. So just, always add on to it, and you know yourself better. Some people just sleep really warm at night, and they just need a 20 degree sleeping bag and they'll be fine. So be prepared, bring extra just in case. Okay, let's get into some clothing.
On sleeping bags.
Question on sleeping bags.
If it's down, don't get it wet. Like down feathers.
Yeah, for sure. If you get into more expensive sleeping bags, there are sleeping bags. The higher quality sleeping bags are all made with down. Down is it's just a short name for the down fur or the down feathers that ducks or birds will have that keep them warm in the winter. And that stuff is a natural. It's literally feathers they pluck off of geese and stuff. So it can get really expensive because they have to. It's more difficult to acquire. But down is actually one of the warmest materials out there. And there's a lot of super expensive sleeping bags that are literally just made with just goose feathers, and they call it down. And it's super warm. It compacts really tight. But the problem is, if it's compacted at all, it's not going to keep you warm. So you need to make sure with if you have any sleeping bag made out of down, make sure it's nice and poofy. So there's even jackets. When we talk about jackets, there's even jackets that are made out of down. But if you have a big old coat that's constricting that jacket down, it defeats the purpose of the down and insulation. So down is you got to be careful, because if it's not poofy, if it doesn't have air to poof out, it's not going to keep you as warm. So if it gets wet, even more important, if down gets wet, it's not going to keep you warm at all. Is there another question?
I was just gonna say, if you have a down sleeping bag, don't store it compacted. You need to store it outside of its stuff sack when you're not using it, like hang it in the closet or something, so that the down will stay fluffed up. Because if you compress down for years and years, it will lose its ability to expand.
Yeah, for those who couldn't hear, she's saying if you have a down sleeping bag or something that's made of down, make sure if it's stored, don't just store it in a nice cramped place, because that's going to reduce the effectiveness of the down. Make sure you store your down sleeping bag somewhere where it can stay open and poofed up, because it's going to reduce its effects over time. Down is very special. You have to take good care of it. But most people don't have down sleeping bags, because they're definitely more on the expensive side of sleeping bags. Okay, I'm just going to move along the table here since we're right here at the boots. Let's talk about boots for a second. And like I said, I don't want you thinking, oh, I need to go spend $100 on nice winter boots so I can go winter camping. Not necessarily. When I first started camping, I literally just used my hiking boots. I had a big pair of leather hiking boots, and those are what I used for probably the first 5 or 10 years of winter camping, until they just fell apart, and then finally I decided, I think it's time to invest some money in some better quality boots. So these are the boots I use. They're meant for winter camping, or they're meant for playing in the snow. They're not necessarily meant for maybe snowshoeing or stuff like that. So if you're doing more extreme winter sports, there's different boots designed for that, depending on the scenario. But if you're just going to go out and play in the snow, these are perfect. They're going to keep you warm. They're going to have a lot of insulation to them, and they're going to keep you nice and dry. Definitely do not do cowboy boots. Cowboy boots are made of leather. So for the most part, they tend to stay dry. The problem is they're very thin. They have very low insulation. So yeah, they'll keep your feet dry, but they're going to freeze your feet off because they're not going to keep you warm. The only other option to that, and we'll talk about it, is layering. So when it comes to your boots, usually you'll wear a couple pairs of socks underneath them, and it just depends on how you are. For me, my biggest problem is my toes always freeze. It doesn't matter how many pairs of socks I put on, they're always going to get cold. So I'll usually wear 2 or 3 pairs of socks. So maybe I'll wear my normal pair of socks, and then I'll wear 2 woolen socks over those, and rock 3 pairs of socks to keep my feet warm. The problem is, if I have those 3 pairs of socks, now they're not going to fit into my very tight, very skinny, very slim cowboy boots. So that's going to be a problem as well. Or maybe they'll fit in there, but my feet are going to be so cramped, it's actually going to start to restrict the circulation. So when it comes to your feet and it comes to your boots, usually you want a pair of boots that's going to be a size or 2 bigger than what you normally would wear. So my street shoe size is 8.5, and these size right here are about a 9 or 10. So like I said, they're about a size or 2 bigger than what my casual walking around shoes are. And that's because I want that extra room, because I want to be able to wear big fat wool socks, maybe a couple pair. If you try to wear a lot of socks and you cram them into tiny boots, it's just going to cut off the circulation to your toes, and if your blood's not getting to your toes will freeze. So be very smart with your gear. Like I said, I just used leather pairs of hiking boots for 10 years. I just kept the laces really loose as much as they'll go. and I wore a bunch of socks, and my toes stayed fairly warm. So just rock what you have. If it's really not going to work, try and find some other way that you can make it work cheaply. A lot of people have boots that look kind of like these, where they're just rubber rain boots. Rubber rain boots are nice because they're completely waterproof. The problem is they don't really have insulation, either on the bottom or on the sides. So if you're going to rock rain water boots like these that you take with you sledding, make sure you're wearing a bunch of different socks under there that's going to stay warm. And again, test it out at home. And you might get there and find out, oh, I put on too many socks. Not a big deal. Slip off your shoes, take off an extra pair of socks, and then you're good to go. Okay, now they're down to a nice, comfortable level. But for me, I don't know why, just the way my body works, it doesn't matter how many pairs of socks on. It doesn't matter how good my boots are. My toes are going to freeze no matter what. And so I've just learned to accept it, and I deal with that in other ways. All right, so those are your boots. So plan accordingly. Again, main thing, make sure your feet stay dry. Do not, whatever you do, don't go with tennis shoes. That is the biggest, that's almost worse than showing up in a pair of blue jeans. Like, you're going to get made fun of. If you show up to this winter camp out and all you have is a pair of tennis shoes, we're going to laugh at you, and we're going to console with you when you're going through those hardships, because your feet are going to freeze, and you might lose a toe or two. That's going to suck for you. Tennis shoes, obviously a no-no. Most tennis shoes are not waterproof at all. They're built to be have a lot of airflow through them, because they're meant for like when you're working out or playing sports. So they have literally no insulation. They're built completely the opposite for that. And also they're really tight and compact. You're not going to be able to fit many pairs of socks on those. So definitely don't rock tennis shoes. So if all you have is tennis shoes, go find a pair of boots. Find some kind of boots. They don't need to be super fancy. Go to Savers, go to the eye, find $15 hiking boots that are a couple sizes bigger than what you normally wear, and those will work just fine. One thing to be aware of, like these right here are work boots. Most work boots tend to have steel toes in the front, and you can already see why that would be a bad idea. You don't want a big, thick piece of metal. That's the opposite of insulating your feet. That's going to freeze your toes, and it's going to make your toes nice and cold. So if you are going to go with a pair of work boots, because that's all you have, try to not have a pair of work boots that have steel toe, because that's just going to do the opposite. It's going to freeze your toes off for you. Question?
I was just going to say, also, if you're going to do a lot of hiking on your camp out or whatever, that steel toes really are hard on your feet. They will jam your toes, and you need shoes that will flex with your feet.
Exactly. So what she said is, if you're going to go hiking, steel toes are a no-no for hiking as well, because they just jam your feet, and you need something more flexible. So like I said, it depends on the activity you're doing. So if you're out and you're going winter hiking, maybe you're just sitting around the campfire the whole time. It depends on the activities you're planning on getting into. If you're planning on going sledding, you're probably going to be tramping through the snow a lot. If you're just sitting around the camp and you just need something to keep your feet warm, then maybe you can do a different type of shoe and you can get away with it. So it depends a lot with the activities you're going to be doing, as well as how bad the weather is going to be, how wet it's going to be. So just look at what you have, plan accordingly, and if you really need to, go buy something. I would check somewhere for something cheap. So definitely try and get something waterproof like these, or something that's going to be both waterproof and also have really good insulation. Okay, so moving on from your feet, let's talk about, so we did talk about the base layer. You're going to need a pair of long underwear. You can go get some cheap ones. If they're made out of cotton, you can get away with it. You'll probably be okay. Look more for synthetic materials for your base layers. And like I said, you don't have to go with just one. If you need to, rock 2 of them. And I even tested it out for one camp out, because I was sick and tired of having all these hundreds of layers, and then I had this big old coat, because I really couldn't do much when it came to activities. So we'd go play in the snow, we'd go sledding, we'd go hiking, and it was kind of really miserable because I'm all hunkered down in all my layers. So there's one year I decided I'm just going to get away with a hoodie. And I decided I'm going to layer up so much that I could just rock a hoodie and be warm. So I did. I put on extra pairs of thermals. I put on a couple t-shirts. I put on all my socks. I had a couple pairs of pants. I had my snow pants. And then I just rocked a hoodie on top. And that was honestly one of my warmest campouts ever. So I ditched the big, giant, poofy coat that I normally wore. It wasn't that big and it wasn't that poofy, but I ditched the big old coat, and I had a lot of maneuverability. I was nice and free, and I actually stayed a lot warmer than I needed to. So keep that in mind. If you ever feel like maybe I'm gonna be too cold, bring extra pairs. Like, bring extra pairs with you. You don't have to wear everything that you get there. Maybe you'll have some extra pairs on the side, and maybe if you end up not needing those pairs, I guarantee you someone's gonna need that extra pair, because someone else is gonna be ill prepared, and they're gonna show up and be like, man, my legs are really cold. And it's like, well, I have an extra pair of pants you can throw on. Alright, so when it comes to your layers, let's start with your base layer for your shirt. Typically what I'll do is obviously you throw your thermal on, this goes straight on your skin, and then what I'll probably do is I'll throw a t-shirt or two over this. Typically long sleeve t-shirts, even just short sleeve t-shirts will work. The idea is you just layer up as much as you can, and then over that, this is what we call your mid layer. So your mid layer is just kind of a light jacket that goes in between what you're going to wear on your skin and your outer layer that's going to keep you waterproof. So mid layer can just be like a nice fleece jacket. I would even just rock like a light hoodie, something like this. And again, these are made out of cotton, obviously, so these aren't super ideal, but if this is what you got and this is what you have to work with, go with it. This is a really nice jacket, and this, like I said, most of this stuff you can find really cheap. You just search around, shop around a little, look at the DI. This is something I picked up at the DI or Savers. I looked at it, I'm like, hey, that looks like a really nice insulating jacket that I can wear over my shirt, but I can also wear it under my waterproof coat. And then I look at the tag, sure enough, tag says it's 100% polyester, and it says the lining is 100% nylon. So that's pretty common. So it means the inner stuff is made out of nylon, the outer stuff is made out of polyester. So the nice thing about this is, yeah, maybe it looks kind of dorky, maybe it looks kind of ugly, but it's going to keep you warm and it's going to keep you dry because it's made out of nylon and polyester. So this is a really nice jacket. I just picked up randomly somewhere. I don't even know where it came from. I just found it in my closet one day and I was like, dang, 100% polyester? Let's go. And this is also a cool jacket because I'm not sure if it was built this way, but I think it's also kind of designed this way. You can flip it around, and now the outside of it, so now the nylon's on the outside, so now it also acts as kind of a windbreak. So if you're in a harsh windy condition and you need something to keep the wind off of you, keep those in mind. So like I said, when it comes to your outer layer is not only to keep you dry. Obviously you want an outer layer that's going to be waterproof. This jacket right here is my most expensive coat I have. This is obviously, because the brand, you can tell it's going to be a very high quality, very expensive. So North Face is going to have really good gear, but they're going to cost a lot. So this jacket costs about $250, $200, and it's a really nice coat. It's really waterproof. The problem with it is this is what we call a soft shell. There's different types. This right here is a winter coat that you would wear. This one is called a hard shell, and it's pretty much in the name. If you fill it and it feels nice and hard, like it's super waterproof, it probably is. There is stuff that is soft shell, like this one, that's also waterproof or water resistant, maybe not completely waterproof. That'll keep the water off you, but it's more of a soft material. The nice thing about soft shells is they'll still let air in and out, which could be good if you're going to be sweating and ventilating a lot. You need air to escape your body so that moisture can get out. If you're snowboarding, you probably want something more of a hard shell so that when you hit that snow over and over again, it's going to keep you nice and dry. So there's different types of outer layers as well. You'll have hard shell and you'll have soft shell. They both work pretty good. It just depends on the activity you're getting into. And if I'm going to be rolling around in the snow a lot with this coat, over time it's going to start to get soaked and kind of start to soak through. If this is just I'm out in a blizzard and a windstorm, this will probably keep me most of the way safe. It's not completely wind resistant. So oftentimes, like, you can go and you'll find like these really cheap, thin jackets that they call them windbreakers, and they're literally just a thin piece of plastic that just keeps the wind off of you and maybe the rain as well. those are really nice, even for winter camping, because you don't care about the insulation of the jacket. You just care about something on your outer layer that's going to keep you dry and keep the wind off you. So if you're wearing all these different mid layers underneath, and then you throw that thin piece of plastic over it, you're going to be perfect. So kind of be smart with your layering and be smart with how you're doing things. So like I said about the mid layers, your mid layer could be just about anything. It could be a light hoodie, could be a nice fleece jacket. Obviously, this, I looked at it, I picked this up out of the closet this morning, and I was like, dang, that's a good example for a cotton mid-layer light jacket. But I actually looked at the tag, and I found out this is 100% polyester. I found another one similar to this that I thought was 100% cotton. Turned out it's 100% wool. So you'll kind of find those, and you'll be like, oh, hooray, awesome. This might be a little too small for me. But you'll find mid-layer jackets like that, and you'll be like, dang, it's actually made out of really good material. It may look ugly, but nobody's going to see it anyways. It's in your mid-layer. You're going to have it covered up with other stuff. And again, like I said, don't feel like you need one of those. I would bring 2 or 3, because you might want 2 or 3 mid-layers over your thermals, but underneath your waterproof coat. Something that's going to keep you warm. So for your chest, that's kind of what you want to go with. When it comes to your legs, obviously you're going to have long underwear for your legs. Some people, and it just depends on you, how you are, most people don't tend to wear too many layers on their legs, and it's for the same reason why you see people wearing shorts in winter, because your legs just don't really get that cold very, very much. Yeah, they get a little bit cold, but they're not like the main parts of your body that you want to insulate. If other parts of your body are getting cold, like they'll tell you if your feet are getting cold or if your fingers are getting cold, throw on an extra jacket, because if you're keeping the core part of your body warm, then it's gonna help keep the rest of your body warm, because the blood that travels to those extremities is gonna be a lot warmer. So a lot of people don't tend to wear too many layers on their legs, so maybe they'll just rock a pair of thermals, and then they'll wear a pair of nylon pants over those. That would be totally fine. Or maybe they just wear their thermals, and then they wear a pair of snow pants. It's up to you, and it's up to what makes you comfortable. But definitely, if you can, get a nice pair of snow pants, because you want some kind of waterproof material on your legs, especially if you're doing anything like sledding or building snow caves where your knees are going to be in the snow a lot. You don't want that to start soaking through your clothes, and now your legs are cold because they're all wet. So get yourself a nice pair of snow pants if you can. I didn't have snow pants for a long time, so I just did my best to avoid getting my legs wet. But I would just rock thermals. Definitely don't wear jeans. There's other types of pants out there. Usually if you go find some pairs of hiking pants are usually made out of nylon or polyester, something that's more synthetic material that's going to stay drier a lot better. So start looking at the pants you have. If all you have is blue jeans, you might just need to go find a new pair of pants. And like I said, check Savers, check DI. You might just stumble upon some nice hiking pants there that fit you, that are going to work good. So it just depends on how much you want to layer. Also, another thing you can go for. So I've done this in the past, and maybe it's not the smartest, but there's been times where it's been really cold. So I just bring my pajama bottoms. Like, these things are nice. They're made out of cotton, so ideally I don't want to play in the snow with them.
Are those cotton or fleece?
These might be
They look fleece, but
fleece. Yeah, so these are actually 100% polyester. So I could play in the snow with these, and they'll stay mostly dry. They'll get a little wet, but they'll dry out pretty good too.
When you're sleeping in your sleeping bag, do you recommend staying in all of your layered clothing?
It depends on you. If you're layering up your sleeping bags, and when you go to bed at night, you know you're going to be toasty, I usually take off most of my layers, and I'll just sleep in my base layer, and then I put my clothes on in the morning. But if you crawl inside of your bag and you're like, it's too cold, by all means, throw on more layers. There have been times where I literally just take off my coat, and everything else I keep on me, and I slide in my sleeping bag, and I fall asleep like that because it's cold. But then I wake up in the night, and I'm like, oh, it's hot, it's too hot, so I take off a few layers. Like, it's not a big deal. So just whatever you're comfortable with when it comes to sleeping. Obviously, most people will tend to take some layers off before they go to bed, because your sleeping bag usually is going to be pretty warm, especially if you have 2 sleeping bags together. You'll stay toasty warm. and you might just need your base layer and you'll be fine. Or just take everything off. It's up to you. One thing to keep in mind if you do that though, if you're taking off layers, the thing is you'll wake up in the morning, you'll be nice and toasty in your sleeping bag, but then your clothes are sitting outside of your sleeping bag and now they're 5-degree clothes because they're the same temperature as the outside. So now you have to throw on these freezing butt cold clothes, and that's just going to be a really hard transition. So a lot of times, often what people do is whatever layers you take off that you know you're going to be putting on in the morning as soon as you wake up, a lot of times people will just throw those down at the bottom of their sleeping bag because there's usually an extra length of room there as well. Or they'll throw them at the bottom of their tarp, somewhere where the clothes stay close to your body through the night, so they kind of stay mostly warm. That way you can put somewhat warm clothes on in the morning when you transition from getting out of your sleeping bag into the frigid cold air. But again, you can just buckle up and deal with it and just freeze your butt off for 5-10 minutes. As soon as you get those layers back on you, they'll warm up eventually. You'll just have to bear with being really cold for 5 or 10 minutes. But there's smart ways to do it. So think about that. Try keeping whatever layers you want to put on in the morning. Keep those close to you. Keep them in your sleeping bag, at the bottom of your sleeping bag, somewhere where you can put warm clothes on in the morning, and it's not going to be as harsh condition. So back to the layering of your pants. Like I said, there's been times where I'll just take pajama bottoms and I throw those on underneath my snow pants. Like, layer it up, do whatever you want. This right here, these are just a pair of joggers. These are what I wear when I play sports or work out. These are really nice because they're really slim and thin and they'll suck tight to your body. Turns out they are made out of 100% polyester, which means they're also going to be, for the most part, pretty waterproof. So I will even take these. If it gets really cold and my thermals are not enough, maybe I'll throw these on, throw my thermals over these, and then throw on my snow pants. And you can do 3 or 4 layers on your legs. Whatever works for you. Whatever's going to keep you nice and toasty. So you might actually have a lot of the stuff you already need to winter camp. Just go look in your closet, look in your drawer, find stuff like this that you wouldn't be like, really? You want to take that camping? Well, if it's made out of polyester and it's nice and warm, for sure take it camping. Like, it's going to be really good. It's going to work good for you. So we talked about your legs. We talked about your feet. We talked about your mid layer. Let's talk about your gloves and your hat. And that should be the last, and that should cover it. And if there's anything else that you still have questions on, feel free to contact me, send me a text. If you have questions on any of this gear, you're like, wow, Lauren, that's a really nice coat. I want to get one just like it. I'm feeling like splurging a little bit here. Just let me know. Definitely my recommendation, if you're going to get anything on here that's really good quality, these so far are the best thing I've found. These are snow pants that I got off Amazon, and they're only 30-40 bucks. They are soft shell, so they're not hard shell. People who like to go snowboarding a lot, they usually tend to go with hard shell because their butt's going to be hitting the snow a lot, and they don't want to get soaked. Teddy borrowed these from me, and he went snowboarding, and it was his first time snowboarding, so you can imagine he was falling on his butt every 2 minutes. But he said this kept him completely dry and completely warm. So these are soft shell pants. They're super cheap. They're like 30 bucks on Amazon. So if you really want to go spend some money on something today, now that you're like, man, that's really going to help, you can go find these on Amazon. And again, if you have questions on anything, you're like, Lauren, where'd you get that item?
Yeah, maybe share those links.
Just text me. I'll send you the links for all the stuff I have, or I'll help you track down something close to it. So let's talk about your extremities a little bit. So we talked about the feet. Let's talk about gloves. When it comes to gloves, obviously you want some kind of waterproof gloves. I was rocking these snowboarding gloves for like the first 10 years. The problem I have with these is these aren't that waterproof. They're warm, but they're not that waterproof. So I eventually upgraded myself to these really nice, these are Hestra gloves. Hestra is like a German or Swedish brand of gloves, and they make some of the top gloves all over the world. So these are like heavy duty, gonna keep your hands warm and waterproof. There's a lot of different things you can do with gloves. Mittens are always going to be warmer because you have all your fingers together in one pouch, so the warmth from your fingers are going to keep each other warm. If they're in gloves like this where the fingers are separated, they're just naturally going to be colder than mittens. But the problem is you can't really do much with mittens. So the problem when it comes to gloves is, how can I keep my hands warm, but how can I also be able to use my hands at the same time? And there's just times where if I'm cooking and I need my fingers, I mean, I can do stuff with these gloves, but still having big old fat sausage fingers, I can't really pick up stuff and use the stove like I need to. So oftentimes I just take off my gloves, set them to the side, and I use my bare fingers while I do my cooking, hurry and get them back in my gloves. You can layer up with gloves as well. I have a small pair of little cotton gloves that are super cheap quality. Sometimes I'll slip those on, and then I slip those inside of my big old snow gloves. You can layer these up however you want. Do you have the remote? You can layer up your gloves if you want to. I usually don't, because you're just sitting around camp, so if your hands aren't in your gloves, they're usually in your pocket, or in your gloves and in your pocket, so it's not hard to keep your hands warm. But bring whatever layers you feel like you need to for your gloves. But the main thing to think of with gloves is, can I still use my fingers and keep them warm at the same time? Because if you can do that, you're going to be pretty good, because it sucks having to take your gloves off and on the whole time. You're going to lose a lot of heat from your hands that way, and your hands are going to get cold. But it's not that hard to warm your fingers back up. You definitely need something to cover your head. This is probably one of the most important things, is keeping your head warm. Especially at night, most of your heat escapes through your body from your head. Not most, but I think they say something like 20% of your body heat escapes out of your head. So maybe you're in a nice warm sleeping bag, but if your head's not covered, you're going to freeze. So even when I go to sleep at night, I wear my big old fat beanie. This is just a big, thick cotton beanie. It's going to keep you nice and warm. It might not be the most waterproof. There's other kinds of hats you can wear. This is a nice wool hat. These look kind of silly, but I used to wear this for a while. It keeps you warm. They have these nice little things to keep your ears warm as well. I accidentally put this to the wash, so now it doesn't fit me anymore. So just be careful with the gear you have. Make sure you know what it's made out of. Anything wool, you cannot wash it. You can wash it, you just have to wash it on cold temperatures, and do not dry it. You have to let them air dry. I accidentally put this through my normal load of wash, and now it will only fit a toddler. It won't even fit me anymore. So keep that in mind with your stuff. Another thing I want to show, and a lot of people don't really think about this, but like, how are you going to keep your neck warm, or how are you going to keep your ears warm? Because this hat's really nice, and I could pull this hat down over my ears, but there's some times where, like, let's say I'm building my snow cave and it's getting too toasty. Now I take my hat off, but now my ears are cold. So there's a couple options you can do there. I really like the idea of getting a scarf. There's really nice scarves out there. Again, check the quality of the scarf. When it comes to a scarf, I really wouldn't go for anything that's not made out of wool, because think about this. Most of the time, if you're using a scarf, you want it to protect your face, and you want it to cover up your face anyways. But when you're covering your face, your air and your breathing lets off a lot of moisture. You can already kind of see my glasses are getting fogged up. So you need something that's going to be breathable as well. If it's made out of wool, the wool can absorb all the moisture it wants, and it will still keep you warm. But if you have a scarf that's made out of something like cotton, it's just going to absorb all that. It's going to get really wet, and your mouth is just going to get cold anyways. So keep that in mind. If you are looking for scarves, they're really smart. They're a really great way to keep your ears and your neck warm. But do keep in mind, if it's going to be covering your mouth at all to keep your face warm, make sure it's something that's going to be breathable, that water and air can get through. This is another new thing. This is kind of relatively new. These weren't as popular. I think these are called gaiters, or it's like a neck gaiter. There's a bunch of different names for these. Every company that makes these has their own name for what they call them. It's pretty much just a cloth tube that you slide over your neck, and it just keeps your neck and your face warm. These weren't they didn't really have these as much back when we were camping in Scouts, but these are pretty popular now. You can find them pretty much anywhere, and these are usually pretty cheap. So the more you spend on it, the better quality cloth you're going to get. These you can do just about anything with. You can use it to cover your mouth, use it to cover your face, to keep your cheeks warm and everything, or you can just use it as just a scarf to keep your neck warm, or maybe you just want to keep your ears warm. These are very versatile. You can do just about anything you want with them. I think they're called like neck gaiters. The companies that make them, they all have different names for what they call them. So you can find these out there. These are really cool. I really like these. I haven't used it yet, but I'm going to be using these a lot. This one's made out of merino wool. so it's still breathable. It can still absorb moisture. So if I cover my face with it, I can breathe just fine. I don't feel like I'm suffocating, and if it collects a little moisture, it's still going to stay warm. So this is really cool. So think about that, what you're going to do to keep your neck warm, keep your head warm, keep your hands warm, keep your feet warm, and then just layer it up with everything else, and you should be good. And if you need to take off layers, you'll be fine. If you need to put some on, you'll be fine. Always stay on the side of caution. Bring a little bit more than what you think you're going to actually use, and I think you're going to camp comfortably, you're going to camp warm, and you're going to have an enjoyable time. Any other questions before we end? Throw that here. This is also just a tip and trick that me and my buddies learned in Scouts. We kind of do this a lot. You get these Nalgene bottles. It has to be Nalgene bottles. It can't just be any plastic bottle. We've tried it and they just melt through. But you can fill these up with boiling water before you go to bed. And then you can just throw this in the bottom of your sleeping bag. And water tends to keep and regulate temperatures pretty well. Or they don't regulate temperatures. They stay a certain temperature. Water stays a certain temperature for a long period of time. So if you fill this up with boiling water, it's going to last for about 2 or 3 hours. It will give you some warmth in your sleeping bag to kind of help out. I personally don't like them because after 2 or 3 hours they lose their warmth, and then you're just left to however good your sleeping bag is. So if you don't have a good sleeping bag anyways, these might not help. But they're probably but a lot of people really like them, and especially when you first jump in your sleeping bag and it's really cold before your body heat starts to warm things up. You throw a Nalgene bottle with boiling water in your sleeping bag, and that will toast things up really nicely. So a lot of people swear by these, and they think that these save their life, and maybe they do. It's just up to you and how your body regulates and how your body works.
Put a sock over it.
But yeah, definitely if you're going to put this in your sleeping bag, be careful. Make sure your lid's on. You don't want this spilling boiling water in your sleeping bag because now you're wet. Also, don't put this on your bare skin. I've had people who've got blisters because they stick a boiling water Nalgene bottle in their sleeping bag and then they hold it to their bare skin and then they get blisters. So usually you'll slip it inside a sock or something so there's no direct skin contact with it. But yeah, that's one tip and trick that we've kind of learned from Scouts, and a lot of us use it. You just get a Nalgene bottle. It has to be Nalgene, or it has to be a material that's not going to melt. Anyways, I think that's pretty much everything I can think of. Again, if you have any questions on specific gear or specific things that we didn't cover and you're like, what about this? What about that? Just ask me. I have a lot of experience. Chances are I have experience with some of the stuff you're thinking about, or I might just be like, I don't know. I've never tried that. Why don't you try it out? A lot of the stuff you learn, you just kind of learn through experience. Like, you're not going to really know until you get into it, but come prepared. Come with as much as you possibly can. And that way you'll kind of figure things out as you go. And I think that's about it.